Hello there everybody, Sam's Trains here, welcome back to the railway, welcome back to the servicing table, and welcome back to another teardown video. So, recently in the teardowns I've done modern locos, I've done one modern Hornby and one modern Bachmann loco, so I thought I would do a vintage one, and what better vintage loco to look at than this, the infamous Class 58. Now I say infamous, the reason for that is because my very first diesel, one of them anyway, was a Class 58. It wasn't this one, it was one in Rail Freight Grey, I think it was. And after a couple of months of me owning her, she went up in smoke and flames. Literally, it was the first and only, I think, fire I've had on this layout. Now I say fire, it wasn't, it wasn't an inferno or anything like that, but there was a lot of smouldering when I took it apart and took a look at the motor. It was not a pretty sight, and I just put that down to bad luck or whatever. But since making videos about some of these Class 58s, I had one or two commenters saying, yes, I too had a Class 58, but it burnt out or whatever. So maybe it was a common issue with them, maybe it wasn't, but the interesting thing about this is that I think the mechanism inside here is pretty much unique to the Class 58. This was one that Hornby did, I can't remember what year it was now. If you want to check out my review for the Class 58, I talk about the year. But normally the Hornby diesels, at least from that era, would have had the ring-filled motor, but this one isn't the case. And we'll talk a little bit more about why that might be later on. But first of all, let's dive in and take a look. I'll flip this one upside down for you, put my cradle in there, and we'll take a look. Now, as was the norm really back in the 70s, 80s and probably 90s as well, only one bogie would ever be driven on a diesel model. So this bogie, for example, as you can see, all of the wheels are completely free to turn, and with this one you've got, that one's solid, so that one's a driven one, that one isn't free to move, and the one in the middle there is free to move. So you've only actually got two driven axles on, if this was a modern loco, I think Helgen have done one, presumably all six axles would be driven, but only two are on this. So we'll start by having a look at the non-driven bogie. I'll just release this. Now, this is the easiest way to do it with the 58s, by the way. The body can come off, but there's really no need to do it. So here we go. Let me lift this out. And as you can see, it's connected by wire. And basically what happens here is this bogie picks up power from one rail, and this bogie picks up power from another. So as you can see, this bogie is the driven one, obviously, and it's got the traction tyres on this side, which suggests, obviously, that the picking up will be done on this side. So those three wheels will pick up from, well, upside down. It's the left rail. Depending on which of these cameras you're looking at. So therefore this bogie here will pick up from these three here, which is the right. So let's take a look. Let me just unplug this. There we go, just the wire, and we'll see where that wire goes later on. But that's literally all it is. So what you've got here is wheels, which are isolated on one of them. Let's take a look here. So I reckon the side with the gears here, that is isolated from the axle, and then these wheels here are live with the axle, and then all you've got is the metal block here, the chassis if you like, which is actually the same chassis as the driven bogie. If you look at that, that's going to be the same thing we're about to see. Then that is live with those wheels, and then as you saw, this power connector, let me grab it again, plug it back in, was literally just connected to the chassis, and that's all it is. As you can see on my close-up shot there, it's just literally a wire connected to the chassis. And that was very common, even with the ring-filled designs, it was done that way. Okay, so let's now go to the other side. Let's see where that wire ends up on the driven bogie. Just see if I can lever this out. There we go. And here it is. So the brown wire comes out, it connects to one terminal of the motor, and then of course if we look here, you can see there's a black wire here which goes from the chassis of the other bogie straight to the other motor terminal. So here it is. This is the weird design of the Class 58. Look at this. See if I can get this in the shot. So what you've got here is, I think this is known as the Type M motor. Is that true? I'm not absolutely sure. I'm not an expert. But it's the same kind of motor which runs their 060 design of tank engine, well, their more recent one. I think it's the same motor as that. And there's a few other models that use it too. And as you can see, it sits on top of this sort of motor block. It's got its worm gear here, which drives this particular axle, not an axle, shaft, which then drives these gears here. So I'm going to take off the bottom of the bogie. There we go, so that you can see it a little bit better here. So there you have it, and then you've got these 4 gears which are literally just screwed into the chassis. It's really as simple as that. And then of course there are gears on the driving wheels here which get turned. But yeah, really quite an unusual design, and like I say, the reasons for it are quite interesting. Maybe it could have been just Hornby experimenting with a new design. Obviously you can see the advantage of using a standard motor. It means that they haven't got to keep producing the expensive Ringfield. But I think the more likely reason is this. If you look at the 58, you can see the body is extremely thin. It's very slim, and the Ringfield motor isn't necessarily quite slim. It's quite a fat thing, and I was wondering if maybe there would be an issue with it fitting inside the body. You know, obviously sitting, you know, square like that, it may have fitted, but obviously it's also got to turn. And I reckon there would have been some gears catching on the bodywork or whatnot if they'd done it like that. So I reckon that's probably what it is. They had to design something special to fit inside the Class 58. But anyway, let's remove one of these screws then. I find this just so, I don't know, it's very British, isn't it? Just gears screwed straight into the chassis. I love that. Quite a lot of assembly required though, if you think about it. Whoever assembled these had to screw all these in, by hand presumably. So yeah, as you can see, just a hole in the chassis there, just a gear and just a screw, and they were just literally screwed in like that. So it's quite simple really, if you think about it. Not a lot to it really, and but for some reason, I don't know why, it was quite prone to failure. I don't know whether must be quite a bit of resistance here against the motor. And obviously it's a tiny motor compared with the Ringfield, so I don't know, perhaps it was underpowered for such a large diesel, I'm not too sure. Now this is going to be fun. It's a nightmare really normally getting these screws back in. Obviously normally there's not much cause to remove them because, you know, it's just you know, you can oil them without needing to remove them. Although, to be honest, if it's used and you want to service it because it's dirty or whatnot, you might well want to take those out and clean everything up. But yeah, what an interesting design. And yeah, like I say, as far as I know, there are no other Hornby locos that have this design. If you know of any, let me know. But the 58 is certainly the only one I've ever come across, and I thought you'd be quite interested to see that. Is it more complicated than the Ringfield motor? I would say so. I think the mechanism itself is very simple, but in terms of assembly, I imagine this would have been really quite complicated to get these screws in, because as I say, it's not the easiest thing in the world, and you've got to sort of do it around the axles and things. So yeah, quite an interesting thing. I don't suppose the Chinese would have been too pleased about having to manufacture something like this, but back when Hornby was made in England, obviously they did. So let's put this thing back together then. It went in this way, I believe, didn't it? They just hook in at the back. Make sure I have got that in, and you should just be able to push it in place. In theory. Has that gone in? You know, I'm not sure. I think it has. Has it? No, it hadn't. It has now, though. So there we go, and then it just clips in. That's quite a nice design, obviously. They're just clipping onto the bodywork, but that isn't new. That is something that the Ringfield designs had. But yeah, quite an interesting thing, really, isn't it? There you go. Quite easy to service, but for some reason there are reports that these are quite prone to failure. Very luckily, this particular example has been fine recently. Well, it's been fine as far as I know. But in a couple of years' time, come back and ask me, and we'll see if there's been any change. But yeah, very interesting design. Really quite fascinating to look at, I think. Hornby definitely didn't stick with it. The Ringfield sort of way outlived this, but very interesting nonetheless. Alright, thanks for watching, folks. As always, if you've got any other ideas for locos you'd like me to do teardowns on, please let me know. I'd be very glad to do them, if I've got them, of course. But for now, that's all I've got to say, so thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you all very soon. Cheers, everybody.